Good afternoon and welcome to the WBC Faster Together series. Happy 2022 and we are thrilled to see you here today. The Women Business Collaborative is an unprecedented alliance of over 65 women's business organizations and hundreds of business leaders building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we mobilize thousands of diverse professional men and women, business organizations, public and private companies to accelerate change. By uniting more than 65 of the leading women business organizations and 450 champions, the WBC activates our vast network to attain immediate and long-term results around 9 essential action initiatives. The first 3 focus on executive women's leadership in business. They are CEO leadership and sponsorship of women CEOs, women in the C-suite and executive leadership with P&L responsibility, and women in the boardroom. Our next 3 action initiatives focus on the underrepresentation of women in business. They are women entrepreneurs and access to capital, women in capital and finance, and women in technology. And our final 3 are critical to equity for women in business. They are diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender and pay parity, and women in the pipeline. Thus, our work focuses on ensuring more women CEOs in the C-suite and on boards, a demand for gender and pay parity, increasing access to institutional capital and capital for women entrepreneurs, driving more women as controllers of capital allocation, parity for women in underrepresented business sectors such as technology, and leveraging learning and development to drive pipeline promotions. Interwoven across every initiative is our call for inclusivity, diversity, and equality for all women, including women of color, the LGBTQIA community, and other disenfranchised women. Our collaboration and network is spearheaded by our board, partners, advisory, and leadership councils. The WBC reaches millions of business leaders across the United States and the globe. We are committed to diversity, and our councils and board of directors include more than 34% people of color. It is this power of combining the collaborative approach with our women's business movement that's already creating momentum and accelerating the pace of change for businesswomen. Today, we will speak with one of the WBC Advisory Council champions, Linda Peek Schacht, who is an executive coach, author, and speaker on leadership and communications. Linda, welcome.
Thank you, Gwen. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here and thrilled to call you a co-host for the WBC Faster Together LinkedIn Live series and to discuss our 22 series, our key themes and trends, how we're learning from each other, and our 9 action initiatives. So let's jump right in, Linda. Let's talk about the themes we'll focus on our 9 action initiatives, from CEO leadership to pay parity to building the pipeline. And our aim to be looking at the trends, the latest data, and best practices. I'd love to know what areas are we covering and why are we talking about these issues?
Well, first, let me say I'm very excited about co-hosting with you, and we're going to have fun and share fun with our audiences throughout 2022. Of course, we're going to continue the good work you did in the last year, highlighting on 2 of the Thursdays the data and the stories and the examples in the area of women's leadership and underrepresentation and gender parity. In addition to those 2 Thursdays, we're going to use one Thursday to do a session on reverse mentoring, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute, and also a session on the public dialogue on women in news and women who are writing the news, because we know that it's important for women to use their voices.
I agree, and this is really kind of the purpose of this, right, Linda? Women's voices are so important in the call for more women in leadership, gender equity, and diversity.
That's right. And that's the reason that we want to feature women leaders who are in the news, but we also want to help people understand how and develop the skills to use their voice in the public arena, not only to advance the goals of WBC, but also to advance their careers. And because leaders are readers, we're also going to be recommending a leadership or a business book every month, and having some authors on who will help us develop our voices for change.
I think this is fantastic because, as you know, Linda, we produce several reports and data, whether that's the percentage of women on boards or our annual, CEO, women CEO report, but the voices, and especially the voice of the media in talking about the data, talking about what we're analyzed, talking about the best practices, the authors, is critically important to really increasing the number of women and changing public perception. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. And also we have something very interesting happening in the news right now, and that is 10 of the major news organizations are now led by women this year. And one of the things we're going to look at is, will there be evidence that there'll be more women quoted in stories, that there'll be more women featured because we have women at the top? Women have traditionally been underrepresented as quotes and sources and stories, particularly business stories. And we want to look at that and see how we can advance women's voices in that coverage.
It's going to be exciting, I think, and it's going to be exciting to hear from these women and these trailblazers, if we can call them that, right? We heard from
That's
a couple
right.
of them at our summit, Nina Totenberg, Judy Woodruff, but really to hear from those different voices. And I really look forward to that and you leading on that charge. I want to turn to a different issue, though. In 2022, we've got at least 4 generations in the workplace, and so that leads to why we're having a once a month on this reverse mentoring, right, or this reverse coaching, this kind of younger and older generations, or I would say more seasoned. Why don't you talk a little bit about what this is and why this is important?
Sure. My experience in coaching has been that I learn as much from my coaches or my mentees as they learn from me. I probably learn more from them. And now, with millennials being the largest generation in the workforce, and they are the ones who are really helping define the workplace of the future, we think it's really important to have a more seasoned leader with a young emerging woman leader talk once a month about their industry and about the challenges they're facing and about what they can learn from each other and they can share with the audience. And either you or I will be interviewing them one Thursday a month. It's going to be very exciting and I think invigorating, particularly for veteran leaders, as we learn from the young emerging leaders who are defining the workplace now.
Absolutely. And especially as I feel like we're having a workplace shift, sort of the post-COVID, the great resignation, right? As we're looking as to what this looks like, I think listening is so important. One of the projects we're working on, interestingly, as you know, is we've interviewed 30 leaders on their non-traditional pathways to the C-suite with a focus on women of color, right? And that pathway to the C-suite looks very different for a 25-year-old today than it did for myself several years ago. So I really think that looking at that pathways and really understanding how career progression is going to happen is incredibly important to really building more diverse and inclusive workspace.
Well, I think the important thing there too, Gwen, is that these young women are paving their own path. And we need to make sure that we're not just imposing ideas from a 20th century pathway for women onto the 21st century. It's very different, as you point out. And I'm very excited to hear their ideas on how they're advancing their careers.
I am as well. I think it'll be really interesting because in that way, we can really say, here's how we're going to change. Here's how more women are going to rise into leadership and more diverse groups rise into leadership positions, which is exciting.
One of the things that we talked about early on with WBC is that we want to change the landscape for the business environment for the next generation. And I think these reverse mentoring sessions are going to be really helpful in doing that.
I agree with you. And it's interesting too, because I think it sort of ties in with the work that we want to do at the WBC in allyship. So one of our most exciting new initiatives is Ally of Her. In fact, yesterday we had our first Ally of Her session with PNC Bank and the Forte Foundation. And I want to talk, have you talk to us a little bit about this allyship and why we're including this, because over 10% of our alliance is men at this point, which is fantastic. And this notion of allyship, this notion of listening and working together is so critical to changing the face and landscape of business leadership.
Well, that's right. Allyship across the board is so important. And many of us know how important the allyship of men has been in our careers and continues to be a really driving and necessary force for change. I'm excited because my friend Pat Shea has built on the work that she's done in Nashville, bringing men into the work of the YWCA there and her other work to make sure that they were walking alongside the women to bring about change in Nashville. And now she's expanding that with WBC to our national effort. It's exciting to me that she will be hosting at least once a quarter an ally for her session, highlighting the men who have really pioneered the way to be an ally for women in their corporations. I know she's going to be having on some really great examples from Nashville and around the country of men and women who have worked together, the women who have benefited from that allyship, getting lessons from them on not just what other men can do, but how women can engage men to help them.
A bit like the reverse mentoring, it's kind of a two-way street. We discussed yesterday, like the asking for it or recognizing that you're going to engage with the men or engage with a wider variety of allies in order to really change what the business workplace looks like.
Well, and like so many of the WBC programs, this is going to really highlight best practices. All of the sessions we're talking about, but in particular, Pat's session on Ally for Her is going to have men share their best practices, and the women that they have been an ally to share that experience so that other people can put those in place.
Absolutely. Which leads me into kind of one of the other, issues and trends that we've all been discussing and reflecting upon and thinking about, which is in women's leadership, is diversity, equity, inclusion. It's very much on the agenda. It's rising across several agendas the past couple of years. I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of, what are you thinking in terms of DN? What are the trends looking like? And we'll talk about this on our series, but how can we as a WBC walk and call for more diversity across business leadership as we're doing?
Well, it's the issue of the day, right? In so many ways. And it's another area where allyship is so important. But data is important too. And I think one of the most important things that WBC can do and that we're doing through this series is to share the data, the examples, the stories of what makes diversity so important. It's not enough just to share the data, though. We've got to be bold in making sure it's getting to the right people. We've got to make sure that we can strongly make the case that the research shows that diverse teams and diverse leadership teams make the best decisions. They make better decisions when they are diverse. But we also have to make the case that diversity is not only the right thing to do, it is the best business decision to take. And with our WBC data, with our focused advocacy, we will get that information and hopefully have that information used for change by senior leaders, by leadership teams, but also by the employees in organizations that are trying to help their leaders bring about the change. What gets measured gets done. And so what we're really looking for is to get senior leaders and employees to work together to say, it's important to measure DE&I. It's important not just to say you're going to do something, but to do it and to be measured against your goals.
And it's interesting too, I'm nodding because what gets measured, what gets done, and what we say often is sort of actionable data. When we talk about it, one of the things we want to do is pull together the data, as you mentioned, the data from companies, but we want to make that transparent. Right? The transparency is so important. And then once it's transparent, I was, okay, so the point of doing that is so that we can do what needs to get done, so that we can act, so that we can develop toolkits, so that we can make actions to actually change the needle and get more diversity, equity, and inclusion. So not just stop at here's what the numbers look like, and continue, but to stay, okay, because of this, these are the actions. This is what works, right? These are the steps that companies are taking. These are the steps that our organizations, over 66 in our movement, are doing to help you, your company, organization, or as you said, you, the employees, make sure that diversity, equity, inclusion are a part of the culture and are things and practices that are happening in the workplace.
Well, really, this ties everything together that we're trying to do with the LinkedIn Live series, right? It brings the data, but it also recognizes that women have to develop their voice in order to be able to bring about change, that we have to make sure we're entering the public dialogue through the news, through being interviewed, through giving speeches, and owning our voice within our own organization to be able to bring about change. But then from your voice comes allyship, right? And so we're going to, we need to make sure that we have the allies in place to help with that advocacy. And finally, we want to engage everybody, every generation in trying to bring about the change. So I'm excited about every month being able to hit those issues: data, allyship, the younger generations in the workplace, and developing women's voices to help bring about the change.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And what I think will be great is if, join us every month, because we will talk about, as Linda said, the data, the people, the leaders, the best practices, the what's working across our 9 action initiatives, right? And how the themes of not just a call for equity and parity, but diversity, equity, inclusion, and allyship are so critical to ensuring more women are leaders and changing the face of business leadership. Linda, I'm excited for 2022. I'm excited to have you co-host. And I'm excited that we're being innovative with the voices that we're going to put on the LinkedIn Live series, and the ability for us to bring out the data and the kind of what we're doing, so that we as the WBC are doing the same thing. We're being transparent with the world of the steps we're taking, how we're doing, and how we're driving this across the organizations, our alliance, but companies as well.
That's right. And I hope we're going to help people develop very confident voices and to be bold in their advocacy, so that by the end of 2022, we have been able to say, these sessions really help bring about change.
I think we have to leave everyone with saying, join us, because what we are here to do is to be bold, to make change, and to act. That's all we have time for today. And I'd love to thank everybody who joined. Our next show will be next week, Thursday, January 20th at 12 p.m. We'll be talking about pay parity with Noreen Farrell from Equal Rights Advocates and Marie Constance from Catalyst. So join us for this critical topic, but join us weekly to keep up to date on our progress, our data, our movement, and the latest issues. And follow us on social media at WBC Collaborative on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thank you, Linda. Have a great Thursday, everybody.